Hello and welcome back to part three of Betting People with Tim Carroll. Now, I'm most excited about this part and you getting to see it because I asked you for questions to give to Tim, and so many of you replied with such great questions. So we'll pose them to him in a moment, but I did want to ask you, Tim, as somebody who's worked in racing all around the world, just about a couple of things to do with the future of the industry, namely how can racing attract a new generation of fans, given that, of course, the type of person around the world that watches sports is changing and doing so pretty rapidly, and what we can do to get more people of different backgrounds into racing. And I'd include the racing media in that. And I wondered if you had any thoughts.
It is a difficult one. Obviously, we're talking about marketing here, and I don't confess to being a marketeer, but we've got to make it more attractive to people who don't go racing. We've got to find a way to have people come. And once people come, you get the natural investment from the attendance. Hopefully, it'll potentially lead into ownership, and then of course you get the punting dollar as well. I know it's a really topical debate at the moment that certainly splits people down the middle, but I've got a feeling the whip's going to go. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with it, having been a horseman myself. I think these days with the whips you've got, and if you hit a horse correctly, you're not hitting on the ribs or the hip, I don't think it hurts them at all, but perception is everything, and the perception is that people are out there whipping a horse to make it go quicker. And in today's society, that just doesn't sit too well. So I think we're going to have a serious look at that. And I think it's inevitable that the whip will be gone, whether it's in a year, whether it's in 20 years, I don't know. I think the other thing is we do need to promote. I'm not trying to be negative because, it's always easier to say when you're not the person doing it. It's easy to be negative about people and jobs they're doing. But I think we do need to look at ways to better promote the sport. I remember when Frankel won the Queen Anne, I had to go back 11 pages to read about it. And, that performance that day is one of the greatest performances we've ever seen on turf. Now, to give you an example of a different mindset in Australia, Black Caviar wasn't even on the back page because she was on the front page for that Royal Ascot meeting. They actually opened up an area down near Town Hall in Melbourne. And Melbourne, that time of the year is freezing. It would have been, I don't know what time the race was on, but it would have been like 1 or 2 a.m. Australian time, and they turned up in their droves. Even though everyone's got pay TV in Australia, all the clubs and pubs have got pay TV, but they still turned up in this cold weather in the middle of Melbourne to watch it on big screens, to have a get together to watch, the Queen of the Australian turf taking on the best from Europe over here, and that just goes to show you the different mentality. I suppose that the problem we've got over here, it's like with anything like that, is we're not working from ground zero. It's already a well-established industry, and it is what it is. And trying to sort of market it in a different way and to bring people around that have never come around before, it's going to be difficult, but we have to work hard at it. And I suppose the other thing I would say, and we see a lot more of it now, it's a lot better. I'm a great believer that people want to hear from the players. I mean, when someone scores a goal in football, you want to hear from that player afterwards. Mm. When Usain Bolt's won the 100 metres, we want to hear from him afterwards. So when jockeys and trainers, and most of them, to be fair, are really good now, so I don't want this taken the wrong way, but some still aren't, and I just don't get it. If you're making a living out of this industry, why would you not want to promote it? Why would you not want to push it forward, for future generations? I nearly think it's your obligation to, and I don't have much time for anybody in the industry that's not prepared to do that. And to be fair, I mean, honestly, overall, people don't want to hear from me. I'm just a conduit. They want to hear from the jockeys and the trainers and the owners. As far as the other point goes, as far as having more diversity in racing, I think it's something that absolutely needs to happen. And these things always come back to education. If you want to take it down to basic levels, I think what I'd like to see, and there might even be something like that out there, but I haven't seen it. And if that's the case, if it is out there and I haven't seen it, then it is a problem. I'd like to see like an inclusion council that represents all backgrounds, because then you get that representation, you get that feedback that's going to be far more active. The other thing I would say, I'm a believer that you should empower people of underrepresented groups. Now, I know some people will say, well, that's negative racism, or it's a reverse racism, or even if you're talking about genders. But a good example of this is a couple of years ago, they gave the lady riders an allowance in France. Now, I get it, I understand. Even some of the girls were saying, well, hang on, we want to be treated as equals. We don't need the allowance. But if you looked at the hard facts, the bottom line is the girls over there weren't getting rides. They were working as hard as the boys. They get up early in the morning, they're riding out. then they're having 3 or 4 rides a month on 50 to 1 squibs that can't possibly win. Now, you don't need to be a genius to work out these girls are going to drop out of the industry very quickly. They gave them the allowance. What have we got now? We've got girls over there riding winners on a regular basis. The proof's in the numbers. It has worked. So I think we need to empower people of underrepresented groups. And I think as far as the media goes, whether it be employing people in the front office, whether it be employing people who work on air, we need to avoid tokenisation. We need a good representation right across the board. But, you know, look, I don't have all the answers. I've never understood the problem. When I say I've never understood it, I don't understand why people have a problem in this area. I mean, I come from a fairly diverse background. I've got an Italian and Scottish heritage. I was born in Australia. I've got a half-sister who's got an Indonesian father, for goodness sake. So I've just never understood it, but, you know.
Some really interesting food for thought. I should just add, not wanting to contradict you at all, the BHA does have a diversity steering group, very similar to sort of the inclusion board, I think, that you mentioned. And an add-on question for that, actually, do you think a female jockey's allowance would work similarly well in other jurisdictions as it has done in France? You know, I find it personally a bit difficult to see that sort of thing flying in England or Ireland. But would it be feasible elsewhere, do you think?
Well, the first thing to say is I'm glad you mentioned that about the BHA. I'm glad to hear that that's happening. As far as being feasible, no, the thing is I don't necessarily think it's needed over here. We're still behind where we need to be. If you have a look at, and again, I'm only using this Australia and New Zealand as an example because I'm familiar with the jurisdiction, but if you have a look at New Zealand, I think Lady Riders have won 3 of the last 4 titles over there. They're well in front of everyone on this front. Australia, it really has come on over the last, say, 20 years. I mean, Jamie Carr will probably win the Melbourne's premiership. It's a state premiership over this year, and girls are riding a lot of winners over there. We're still behind that over here, but we've certainly, even in the 16 years I've been here, we've certainly come a long way on that front. The interesting thing is, as well, is I don't want to speak for the individuals, but they can speak for themselves. But if you have a look at social media, a lot of the leading female riders say they don't want it anyway because they find it a bit disrespectful. It's like, well, hang on, are you saying that I need a £2-3 pound allowance to compete with the boys? Hell no. So I don't necessarily think we need it over here, to be honest.
Okay, and now going on to Twitter questions, which I cannot wait to get into this because I've been looking forward to them ever since I got them. Gonna start with this belter from Sam. Should be on screen now. Which is the tastiest crustacean? I believe you've got something to show us with this, haven't you?
It's funny you mentioned it a moment ago. It's what I would say Moreton Bay bug. For people who don't know, I love my seafood. It's sort of my go-to meal. A Moreton Bay bug is sort of like I suppose it's like a little ugly lobster, if you like. I'm pretty sure they're only found in Australia and only a certain part of Australia. But I thought a lot of people don't know what they are. Hopefully you can see that. That's a couple of Moreton Bay bugs on a barbecue. I would put those in front of any other seafood, but by goodness, there's no such thing as a bad seafood. I'll eat anything. I don't care. Oysters, sea snails, obviously prawns and fish and lobster and crab, you name it, I'll eat it if it comes out of the ocean.
A little homage to Ben Keith here, but recommend us a place to go for seafood in the UK. I'll give you a minute. We'll give you a minute to do a quick seafood review.
Yeah, I tell you what, I went to somewhere recently that was really nice, and I can't remember the name of the place. I need to go and have a look at my holiday snaps, and then I could look it up. It was so good, actually. And if you give me a moment, I might even sort of send you a text, and you can mention it.
We'll do that. We'll do that after because we got quite a few questions to get through. Boring Noel Garbett. What a name that is, by the way. So many of you have such great names on that website. He can't believe that he's only just seen this. Well, you're in time, Noel. And who's your favourite jockey, Tim?
To be honest, I wouldn't have a favourite. I like a lot of jockeys. I've always been, like a lot of people, I've always been a big fan of Frankie Dettori. And I'm not just talking about because he's such a lively character. If you watch as much racing as a lot of us do and do as much form as I do, he is just a brilliant rider. And one of the things I like him, it's a little bit like Zach Purton in Hong Kong. He's got plenty of conviction. I see a lot of riders, they get instructions and they go and stick to those instructions, even if it's to the detriment of the way the race sets up. Whereas Frankie's got the confidence to say, stuff this for a game of cards. We're going to ride this a little bit upside down, or we're going to ride it a little bit differently. And then he's got all the other attributes as well. He's beautiful in the saddle. He picks the horse up very nicely. He's a great judge of pace. Yeah, he's the all-round package. So he'd be one of my favourites. Zach Purton, who I just mentioned, I don't even think Zach would mind me saying this. He's got a touch of arrogance about him, and a lot of leading sports people do, and it serves him well. So he would be another one. In Australia, I've always been a big fan of Damien Oliver, who's been around for a hell of a long time. And if you're going back a few years, look, I could probably name a couple of Australian jockeys you wouldn't know, so they wouldn't mean anything. But like everyone, Lester Piggott. And again, you have that sort of arrogant confidence. And the thing about Lester, I was riding at the time when he came over to Australia, and he had sort of this really short stirrup, especially at the time, which stirrups have gone up and up and up over the years. And he used to stand up quite tall in the saddle compared to what we were doing over there. And the idea being you'd get wind resistance by crouching down. And I remember when he was asked about it, he said what he was doing, he was standing up tall and putting his weight straight down the wither and the front legs of the horse. And that allowed the horse, who gets the power from the back end, obviously, it allowed them to be stronger. So I sort of tried it a few times in track work before I did on race day. And he was absolutely spot on, as you would expect. So I've always been a big fan of Lester Piggott and anyone that can be riding derbies, Derby winners in their 50s. And back then that's when 50 was 50, whereas now they say, 50 is the new 40. And when you look at his record, how could you not respect the man?
Wonderful tale there. Moving on to Simon Lovell, who asks, what part of the country is that flash pad by the river that Tim lives in? And secondly, with Prince Khaled Abdullah passing, is the future of UK and Irish Group 1s that they'll become a Coolmore benefit? First things first, where are you, Tim, if you don't mind us asking?
I'm in a little country lane. I lived in London for a few years, a great city, but I just found it a little bit too much being a country boy from Australia. So I bought this place 10 years ago now, and I'm in a country lane just outside of a village called Great Brickhill, which, unless you live in Great Brickhill, probably means nothing to anybody. It's basically halfway in between Leighton Buzzard and Woburn. And why it looks a bit spectacular is it is actually an island. That's the name of the property. The water comes down the back and it splits either side, and it joins up on a little bit of property I've got on the other side. And just out the front, there's a road with two little bridges. So it's called the island. And when I tell people back in Australia I own an island, they kind of think like Hamilton Island or something like that, something like Richard Branson would own. It's not quite that sort of island, but yeah, look at it. It's a nice little joint.
And just to give a bit of flavour, where would be your nearest racecourse?
Probably Toaster, I think, is about half an hour drive away. And sorry, I didn't answer the question about Juddmonte.
We were going to go on to that. So, yeah, do go on, sorry.
Well, I hope it'll continue the way it is. I saw an interview that Matt Chapman did with Lord Teddy Grimthorpe, and it sort of gave me a little bit of hope at what he said. Matt asked him the question. He said, the people, the family, they know how important racing was to Prince Khaled Abdullah. So he's very hopeful that it'll continue in the same vein. And when you have a look at how successful they've been, the champions they've had over the years, fingers crossed, let's hope they do.
Absolutely. Just going on actually from the idea of monopolisation, this is brilliant from Loretta Chance. Asking specifically about the Cheltenham Festival, is the festival getting too monopolised by the big three after taking 18 out of the 28 contests last season? Now, on the screen, we've got a list that they've put together of festivals from 2015. It goes from 11 out of 28 races to 18 out of 28 races across that sort of 5-year time span. And I was just wondering, do you think, as a jumping fan, that's now the case that the big three trainers, one presumes Nicky Henderson, Gordon Elliott and Willie Mullins, are dominating the festival to the point where they're monopolising it?
I think the first thing you've got to say, trainers' job is to train winners, and all three of those should be given a pat on the back for being successful as they are. So what I'm about to say is certainly not a reflection or any sort of negativity towards those trainers. But if you're talking about marketing sport, absolutely, it makes it really difficult. The one thing about horse racing, one thing about any sport that you need to sell it is passion. And what drives passion is the stories within the sport, and for us within racing. And I've said for a long time now that I like the idea of valuable Group 1 handicaps like we have in Australia and like they have elsewhere. Because it gives I know it's difficult these days. I mean, it's not an easy race to win the Melbourne Cup, but I can tell you now, you and me, if we went and bought a horse, we'd be far more chance of winning the Melbourne Cup than we would the Derby. It gives the smaller player or the middle-sized player or a syndicate more chance of winning the race, and people love that. They love seeing the underdog win. A little bit like only a few years ago, Prince of Penzance winning the Melbourne Cup. Now, what a wonderful advertisement that was for horse racing right around the world, not just in Australia, because you had a 100-to-1 outsider who wasn't fancied to beat all these wonderful, European horses and a few wonderful local horses, and then you had a lady rider aboard. And she still, to this day, is the only lady rider anywhere in the world to ride her nation's premier race. So I do think that if you've got the same 2, 3, 4 people dominating all the time, it is to the detriment of the sport, but it's a difficult one because that's their job. They're just doing their job so well.
Absolutely fair enough there. I should add, the festival this year is not all that far away, so we will see what happens in the future. Regarding dominance of a particular race, John Kennedy asks, what's his opinion on the dominance of British and Irish trained horses in the Melbourne Cup, and who's king of the Hong Kong tipping, you or John Blant?
Well, I'm a great believer in international racing. I think it's the way forward. So I've got no problem with the Europeans going down there. I think the one issue you've got to be a little bit careful you don't detach yourself from your local audience, because the Australians and the Kiwis, they need someone to root for. They want their local horses in there. And when the Europeans turn up and all of a sudden you've got 12 horses you've never heard of before, and then of the other 12, 7 or 8 are ex-Europeans anyway, it kind of feels like you haven't got a dog in the fight. If you have a look at the Longines ratings came out the other day, and there was an Australian race in the top 10. Normally the Cox Plate would make it in 1 or 2 of the sprints, but the takeout from that, when I was looking at the Australian side of it, even without the Everest, which doesn't qualify because it's not a Group 1 because it's a buy-in race, the top 5 sprints in the world were still at Australia, and I think that's a reflection of where Australian racing is at. I love a big sprint as much as I do a 2-mile race or a mile race, so I haven't really got a preference. But I do think it's a shame that we're at the stage now where Australia, world-class horses, except for the occasional exception like a Winx or a So You Think, are basically all sprinters.
Moving on, although the Anglo-Australian theme is still very much alive, question here from the legendary Dave Bradshaw, who, by the way, is doing brilliant work. Thank you very much, Dave. We're honoured to have you asking a question here on Betting People. Should we move the King's Stand to Melbourne and the Melbourne Cup to Newmarket? I'm guessing he's been a bit facetious, but I'd be interested to hear your answer.
Well, the problem with that, Dave, would be that if the Melbourne Cup came to Newmarket, it would be worth 2 bob overnight. So you'd completely destroy the race. No one would want to turn up for it. If the King's Stand went to Australia, to be honest with you, it'd end up being engulfed in the program over there with all the other sprints. I think we better keep it the way it is. I like seeing the Europeans who go down to Melbourne. The other thing is, something I do like to see, if the King's Stand and the Diamond Jubilee at Royal Ascot, as we saw with Blue Point, as we saw with Swazier, and as we've seen with other horses who have attempted the double, like Takeover Target, Miss Andretti. I just think it works so well to have that Group 1 5 furlong race on the Tuesday, Group 1 6 furlong race on the Saturday, and see, hopefully the King's Stand winner then turn up on Saturday and try to take out the double. So I know Dave's having a little bit of a laugh there, but no, because they're both wonderful races that serve a purpose and are doing absolutely fine the way they are.
And moving on still, we have a question here from Harry Haskell, who asks, what is the most embarrassing moment he's had on Sky Sports Racing?
Oh, dear. To be honest, I've been fairly lucky. Some of the viewers might disagree. I don't think I've made too many gaffes, not bad ones. I've mixed my words up here and there and whatnot. But I do remember, it wouldn't have been on there. I remember what happens is when you hook up, you've got two packs. I normally put them in my suit jacket pocket. Some people put them on the belt.
Same. You get clipped up on your lapel and it's in the little pocket to transmit to gallery or whatever.
Absolutely spot on. Now, what I did one time is I went to the loo and forgot to turn my mic off. And then these mics are pretty powerful. They pick up everything. So needless to say, I'm sure the gallery weren't overly impressed. I suppose the other one is I remember I was a couple of months ago, it's very unusual you get a fly in a studio, even in Australia, let alone over here where we don't have that many of them. But I was on 3 nights in the bounce. Every night there was this one fly, and he looked like an Australian fly. I mean, he was a fair size. And he just turned up and decided, I'm trying to talk, and you're live. There's no delay at Sky, so you're live. And this thing is flying here and here and here. 3 nights. The third night, when we went to a break, the thing was right in front of me. So I tried to grab him like this. You know, I had a decent I'll go at him, and I still missed him. And I was watching, I think, Get In a week later with the lads. And of course, they put the clip up on there. They hadn't told me. And I looked a bit of an idiot. You know, it looked like I was sort of, you know, I don't know, some sort of washed up boxer that didn't know how to, you know, throw a punch, just, you know, punching at the air sort of thing. But yeah, look, to be honest with you, I don't think I've had anything too embarrassing happen at Sky. Maybe 1 or 2 things in my radio days back in Australia, but nothing too bad at Sky.
Love this from Colin Locke. Where do you buy those Cuban cigars?
I'd love to say Cuba, and I'd love to say they were for mint. I've had a few Cubans. The one that was online, I think it was one online the other day. I had a couple of days off, and it snowed, so I built a snowman out the back on the deck, and I was having a couple of ales. As I said, it was a day off, and after a couple of ales, I tend to now and then pull out. I would never condone smoking. I don't smoke, but I don't mind. I don't mind having a cigar now and then. I'm usually on special occasions, which a special occasions is anything from about 6 beers inwards. So yeah, they weren't Cubans. They were cigars. I picked up a small box of cigars when I was at the races in Saratoga, and that was the last one of them. I pulled it out, and they weren't overly expensive. I don't know what brand they were, but they were quite nice. Although, you know, I don't confess to being a cigar expert.
And this from Zach Piper, which I think is probably going to be close to the last question, or maybe even the last question. I absolutely adore it. So let's get right into that. Do you think the tab or similar could work in English pubs? I will let you explain what TAB stands for.
Yeah, it's a totalised agency board, so it's a tote system, and I think where Zach's going with that, in Australia you have a betting terminal in every pub, every sports club, and it's a wonderful setup, because what will happen if you've got a sports club, and there's plenty of them in Australia, in a sports club you will have a betting shop, as we call them over here, or a tab as they call them over there. You will have restaurants, you will have snooker tables, you'll have poker machines, you'll have a room set up for the kids. So the beauty about all of that is you can literally have a family day out or evening out. Everyone can go to, and dad can still go and have a bet without sort of, you know, over here it's like sneaking into a betting shop where, you know, the only people in there are having a bet, and it's mostly, you know, adult men. Do I think it could work? It'd be very difficult I think it'd be very difficult to get it set up over here, but yeah, of course it could work, and it would lift the profile of racing. I think it'd be wonderful if they did it. I mentioned it years ago to people who sort of looked at me a little bit like I was crazy, but it gives you a different experience if you're having a bet. One of the best betting shops you'll ever sit in is in Bondi. There's a betting shop there at the RSL. So you go and sit in the betting shop, you're over this world-famous pool at Icebergs, you're looking out over Bondi Beach, you have a bet on the horses, you can buy your Moreton Bay bugs from over here, you can have a few beers, wonderful. So do I think it could work? I absolutely would work over here, but good luck trying to set it up and getting the powers to be to sign off on it.
I agree with that. I should also say, as somebody who's been to many a PMU bar in France, it is an absolutely wonderful, wonderful thing. Thoroughly recommend it. I believe actually that sadly means we're at the end of our wonderful, wonderful question and answer session with you. Tim, thank you so much for everything and being an absolute star, no pun intended, for us on Betting People this week.
My pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
And thank you all for the questions and for watching and listening if you're listening. Stay tuned. We've got lots of great guests coming in the future, which we will release over the next couple of months or so. And don't forget, of course, you can find Tim on Sky Sports Racing, and you can look at our Betting People back catalogue by simply heading upwards and rightwards, I believe, and clicking on Betting People. But for now, thank you for watching and goodbye.